Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larson. Today on the show, we've got Michael Monaghan.
The work is constant. And so if it's not something that you enjoy doing, and I realize that sounds, trite, but it's very true. If it's not something that you're really passionate about and isn't your mission, it's going to be very difficult to keep pushing through the low points.
Michael, thanks for making time.
Great. Glad to be here, Jess. Thanks for inviting me.
So for people who don't know what Beartooth is, can you give us the 30-second elevator pitch?
Yeah, so Beartooth allows you to talk, text, and see your friends on a map using your smartphone, even in areas with no cell service or Wi-Fi.
So give us some applications.
Great. So one of the things I use it for a lot is skiing in the backcountry. That was actually the genesis of the product. I was skiing at Bridger Bowl almost a half decade ago, and there was no coverage on the mountain. And we realized we needed a better way to stay in touch. So certainly outdoor activity. We do quite a bit of business in helping the extractive industries. So if you're running a mine or a forestry project and there's no infrastructure, we help you communicate. We also work quite a bit with law enforcement and military for tactical communication as well.
Oh, that's great. So thinking about the concept of innovation and leadership, when you got reached out to from the show, I mean, I told you why I'm excited to have you on the show. Backcountry snowboarder, I think I want your stuff, right? And I think it's great to see solutions coming out there. But when you saw, hey, these guys from innovation and leadership want to have me on the show, what comes to mind when you think about innovation and leadership?
So I think innovation, is just really spurred by people who have a need that needs to get met, and they don't like the pain they're being put under, and they translate that pain into a solution to help people. And I think that's the whole genesis of innovation, at least it is for us.
Yeah. When you think about the ups and downs and all the pain from like good idea to something that actually works, in your mind, what are some of the principles, maybe for other folks listening who they're past the idea, but they're not to the point of having something work yet? What kind of principles come to mind for you?
Oh, I think you really hit it on the head, that the amount of effort between sort of the ideation, visualization stage, right? And then you've got to develop your plan to implement that visualization, and then you've got to actually take the steps, that is, execute the plan. There's just a lot of valleys you've got to push through, and really. And I'll drift a bit from innovation to entrepreneurship, but I think they're tied at the hip. Entrepreneurship is really being the one guy in the room willing to take risk. That's really what an entrepreneur does. Because everyone that you're interfacing with, every supplier, every customer, everybody wants to avoid taking risk. And so you're the person in the room that's willing to take risk and overcome every obstacle. And that's really what innovation is that, it's just the daily overcoming of obstacles.
Yeah. What are some of the things that helped you get through obstacles? Or are there books you like? Are there things you say to yourself? Are there, mentors of the past, or with a combination of all those? What are some of the things that you feel like have helped you kind of endure long enough to succeed?
So I don't know that I would point to any reference diagram. I do really think, although there's no cookbook for innovation, Paul Graham's really come the closest. And so he wrote all these essays that are still online, and I think that's probably really the best of anything to read. And he's addressed pretty much every obstacle you'll face in startup, from hiring to raising money to he's really covered it all. So I think that's probably the most interesting for me.
Is that on the Y Combinator website, or is that the Paul Graham you're talking about?
Yeah, it's Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator. I think you just I don't think it's on the Y Combinator website. I think it's just, if you just Google Paul Graham essays,
It'll come up.
Yeah, it'll just come up.
Okay.
It's literally just Paul. It's just his name.com.
Okay.
You just type in paulgraham.com, they come up. And then for me, I'm sort of, it's the genesis of the product. I like to do stuff outside, so I like to ski as much as I can in the winter. Although there was a 2-year period where I think I maybe only skied 3 days, 2 or 3 winters in a row. But the last couple of winters, now that the product's up and working, I've got to go. Try to run every day. And this summer was actually great. I set out to surf every day. So every day that I wasn't traveling, I surfed for at least 2 hours before work. And I find that that's actually when I solve all the hard problems, is either out running or waiting in the lineup. I usually figure out how to overcome some nasty obstacle.
What's your break of choice? Where are you surfing?
So I usually just surf 24th Street in Manhattan Beach because it's walking distance from where I live.
Okay. First time I ever went surfing in my life was Manhattan Beach.
Great.
So I want to talk about this. So you have your years back, UBS, Carlyle, Goldman. How do you feel like that experience helped you as you needed to lead this innovative company doing what you're doing?
So it was definitely helpful from the corporate formation standpoint, understanding how to raise money, understanding what metrics investors cared about, just seeing tons and tons of companies, those that were really well run and those that weren't so well run. And so, from day one, kind of had a sort of a mosaic of what I thought was important for starting a new company.
Yeah. When you think about the technology that you've got and the challenges that anything new has, can you tell us a couple of the stories of, this felt like an insurmountable challenge, or we thought we had this figured out and then it set us back a year, or any of those kind of things that it took to get the product out?
I mean, I think it would terrify people if they really knew, what gets overcome on a day-to-day basis. But I'll tell you a couple of the fun ones that your listeners can relate to. I mean, one of the more recent ones was actually, we play in the iOS and Android ecosystem. So to a certain extent, we're very reliant on those two systems and the quality of those two systems. Well, when Apple released iOS 11, there was a pretty significant bug in their Bluetooth Classic stack. So while Bluetooth LE was working at the release of iOS 11, Bluetooth Classic was not for about 4 months. And really the only way it got solved was us, going up to Cupertino and helping those guys actually fix the code. It was really my CTO that walked them through how to do it. So I mean, that's just that's probably a highlight one, and one that people can relate to because they use iOS. But those are the challenges we face, fairly regularly, more than we'd like.
Which is funny because it would be so easy to think about your product as hardware, right? Which obviously doesn't function without the software.
Yeah. So the way I describe it to people, and we're pretty transparent about this. All of our hardware is commodity hardware. This is, a pretty basic ARM processor, off-the-shelf power amplifier. The one thing that's pretty neat, we do use Semtech's LoRa chip, which is a really innovative transceiver. But what makes our product magic is just the intense software development that we've put into making these commodity chips behave in a very interesting way.
And so it is interesting, right? Because you can see, is it essentially, so the unit that the phone pairs with, it's basically like a super radio. Explain to me what the physical unit is compared to, any two-way radio or something. It's essentially a radio that your phone can talk to, or explain that.
Yeah. So it basically turns your smartphone into a really powerful walkie-talkie, where the smartphone is the user interface. So if you look at an old school walkie-talkie, they're kind of cumbersome to use. They've got all these buttons and dials, and frankly, if you don't know how to set it up or use one, they're not very approachable.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we stripped that user interface off, and we just allow you to use the one you're used to, the touch screen on your smartphone. And so that pairs, then our device pairs to your smartphone via Bluetooth, and then we transport all of the information over our LoRa radio layer.
Yeah.
So that's really just the key difference is, being able to use your smartphone as the interface and have all the tools that it's capable of, sending a positional location, texting, digital voice, all these things that wouldn't be available on a traditional radio, or something as simple as, on a radio, I got to figure out which channel I'm on and maybe set a code, and it's all very confusing. Where if you and I are out skiing, you just push the Michael button and I just push the Jess button, and maybe you've got your whole family with you and you just push the family button, or maybe you're friends with you and you push the friends button. So it's just as easy to contact all of your friends and group as it would be on your smartphone using contact management.
And tell me the range again, approximately.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so it really all depends on terrain. But in working around in sort of buildings and houses, you should think about a half a mile. A little bit wider open country, you should think about a couple miles. We've actually talked 25 miles in a wheat field in Montana. And I would tell you, if you're running around downtown New York City and there's a skyscraper in the way, you're going to only talk a block or two. So
Yeah.
they're what are called line of sight radios. And so as long as there's line of sight or an approximate line of sight, you'll get, you'll be able to, communicate. And as that line of sight begins degraded with obstructions, your range will drop off.
Yeah. So starting a business, knowing this is what you want, so you can talk to your buddies on the ski hill, pretty sure it didn't come to mind. And we'll probably have to go tell Apple how to fix their stuff.
Yeah, we did that with. I mean, we never anticipated, some of that stuff.
So in your mind, for folks that are going to need the mental toughness to come up against challenges like that and deal with uncertainty, what are principles, what are lessons that you think can help the rest of us, be more prepared to face uncertainty?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the common wisdoms is that I would agree with is you've got to pick something that you're truly interested in, because the work is constant. And so if it's not something that you enjoy doing, and I realize that sounds trite, but it's very true. If it's not something that you're really passionate about and isn't your mission, it's going to be very difficult to keep pushing through the low points. So I think that's the key thing, is to attack a problem that you feel like is important for the world. I think the best reference on this is when people ask Elon Musk his advice to start a business, and he usually says, "Don't start one," because it's the equivalent of eating glass all day long. And he's chosen a couple of very ambitious things that are very stimulating to him. And I think it has to be something you absolutely believe is a mission, or it's going to be very difficult to push through the difficult parts.
It's interesting how that advice could sound cliche, but when I look at a number of my business failures, that I was doing the deal for the money,
Yeah.
And so it sounds so simple. It sounds almost cliche, yet I think about the times that I haven't done that, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a business. I've invested a great deal of my net worth from a previous lifetime, and I haven't really taken a salary in half a decade. And so there has to be something motivating you other than money. I get motivation, when we, some snowboarders stoked because they got to drop into a chute that they normally wouldn't have, or we talked to someone in law enforcement who used Beartooth to literally save someone's life, or we talked to a soldier who's used Beartooth for something really important. Those are the things that motivate me. That's the odd part about entrepreneurship is, I think, you certainly hope to have a good economic outcome, but I don't think very many entrepreneurs are motivated by money.
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break from the sponsor, and then we'll keep going with this. So, Michael, before the break, we were talking about doing something that you actually really want to do, because the Elon Musk quote about entrepreneurship is like eating glass and staring into the abyss, right?
Yeah.
So I want to hear about this. So tell us a couple stories, like this story about a police officer that saved somebody's life because they had Beartooth.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't want to be super dramatic, but if you're, one of the first things that first responders get to do is get comms up and going, and so we work with the one that comes to mind is search and rescue. They're out looking for someone. They identify them, but there's a team of people moving in clearing, and they don't have LTE comms up there, and they don't have traditional LMR comms. But by having a couple people who are carrying Beartooth, now they can start setting up the rescue scene, even talk to other assets that are moving nearby. I think that's one of the really powerful ways that it can help people. I actually, one of the things our tool gets used for a lot by law enforcement is surveillance. So that's, we don't want to talk about, I don't want to expose any of their tactics and put any of them at risk, but, it's a cool tool. It allows them to, engage in surveillance without being noticed, I guess we could say.
Yeah. Low vis option.
Yep.
That's great. Well, we've probably got time for one more good question here before this half of the interview is over. You do press. You've got a company that all sorts of major media outlets want to cover, the TechCrunch and Popular Science and Wired and stuff. What's a question that people don't ask you that you think they should?
That's incredible. I think you've stumped me. I mean, I think we've talked about why people are entrepreneurs and why started the company, and obstacles to overcome. So I think you may have stumped me on that one.
Let's go for another one. What's a piece of advice, if you had a chance to go back and give yourself a younger version of yourself advice, what would you tell a younger version of yourself?
Focus.
Tell me about that.
So I think where I've really seen excellence in either our the people who are involved with Beartooth, whether it be employees or vendors or suppliers, the people that are incredibly focused on their craft. I think it creates a more joyful and enjoyable life to get really good at something. And so I think that earlier in my career, I think I was delivered for the places that I was working at, but I would have been a bit more focused early on.
It's interesting how I don't know. I'm a guy who likes shiny objects, and how often that's been unhelpful to progress, right?
You mean changing direction too often?
Yeah, or trying to do too many things at once, or there's that great quote about it takes a magnifying glass to focus the sun's rays to start a fire, right?
Yes.
It's not the dispersion, it's the concentration.
No.
Yeah. I love it. Yep. I love it. Okay, this is a great place to end for part one of the review. Everybody, please tune back in for our next episode. We're going to hear more from Michael.